It is the state auditor of the state of Mississippi, Shad White. Nope, there he is. Good morning, sir. We were about to put out an APB on you, but you're there. You doing?
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Are you doing okay, sir?
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me. How are y'all doing this morning?
It is. We're doing fine. It's a pleasure having you. Look, you made news yesterday, and I'm looking for the copy here on this one. That State Auditor Shad White is pushing Ole Miss to fire one of its professors, James Thomas, saying Thomas illegally participated in a 2-day strike last week. I think mostly, Shad, people are saying, how does the state auditor work in this? And you've defined that in a couple of articles to several reporters, but a lot of people have not heard that. So how's the state auditor getting into this fray?
Sure. Yeah, well, the first thing I would say is that in Mississippi law, it's very plain. Striking and concerted work stoppages are illegal. That's the word that the statute used. I didn't make the statute up. I'm not God in Mississippi. I don't get to say what the statute is. The statute, the law in Mississippi says that strikes and concerted work stoppages are illegal. And the statute that defines the role of the state auditor's office, that tells me what to do every single day, says that my job is to make sure that public funds are not, quote, illegally expended. It's literally the same word in my statute as it is in the statute that bans strikes and concerted work stoppages. So in this case, you pointed this out. We had a professor at the University of Mississippi who last week struck for 2 days. He spelled it out in detail in an email to his students. He talked about the work-related tasks he would not be doing. He called it a strike. He called it, quote, a work stoppage, which is the same language that is used in our statute that's banned. And when he said that, he violated the law. And as a result of that, he can't be paid for those 2 days. And also as a result of that, the no strike statute applies, and the penalties in the no strike statute are pretty plain. It says a court shall order the termination of that employee. Now, I've read some headlines that say state auditor pushes for this, state auditor argues for that. I literally just read the statute out loud, and that's what I have stated. And if folks don't like what the statute says, they're free to run for the legislature and try to get it changed. Good luck with that.
And get it changed, yeah. So in other words, there's not an option on this. There's not multiple choice on here. If you violate that, you should be terminated.
The statute is not only really plain, it's got the word shall in there a whole lot. So it says the employer shall file suit. And then 2 sections below that, it says a court shall order the termination of his or her employment being the employee who struck. So
it doesn't say will, it doesn't say may, it says shall. And what does the word shall, what weight, the weight of the word shall means there's not a lot of options in there.
There's no stronger word that the legislature uses. It's not should, it's not may, it's if you feel like it. You know, shall means shall. And strike means strike, and work stoppage means work stoppage. You know, sometimes the words that we say and use mean the actual thing that we mean. And so there's a lot of twisting and turning in the wind trying to pretend that what this professor did was not a work stoppage. And folks are free to try to make that argument, but it's going to be very difficult given level of detail that he spelled out in an email to his students about the work that he was not going to be doing during those 2 days.
I want to go deeper than this, and I know as far as the law is concerned, what was in the past has nothing to do with this. This goes back to the strike itself. But the incidences in some of the words and some of the things in his paper trail, most of us ask this question in the state of Mississippi, whether we've gone to that school or whether we've gone to college or whether we've gone to public schools. If you're just, you got to look at it and say, at what point does this tenure protect incompetency, stupidity, or breaking the law? And I don't know what we can do about this tenure. In no other facet, no other job in here or on the line or in traffic controllers, where if you're there for 15 or 20 years and you have a tenure, you can do this.
Yeah, and it's a point worth making. Some people have said, well, he's got tenure, you can't fire him. Tenure doesn't protect you from violating other state laws. if I had tenure in this job and I went out and robbed the gas station down on High Street, my job would still be in jeopardy because I would have burgled that gas station. So in this case, yeah, he has tenure. Putting aside the question of whether or not he should have been given tenure, that's not what I'm concerned with. Putting aside anything that he said in the past, that's not what I'm concerned with. What I'm concerned with is this attitude that state law says something, but those laws don't apply to me because I'm special. Well, nobody's special. The state law applies to everybody. And so really all I'm doing is looking at the job that I've been given by the voters of Mississippi to protect public funds and enforce the law, and applying those job duties to this situation. And that's it.
But it's almost in your face that I can do this, and I understand the political aspect of this. Then you have the people who are saying, well, this is what college is about. You're supposed to expand the brains of these young people and make sure they have a chance to think on their own. This goes beyond that as far as his paper trail and some of the things that he said earlier. This Twitter storm that he had previous saying that if you see a U.S. senator, stick your finger in his salad, take their food away from them, take it home, whatever you want to do. And this has been quite a few months ago. And I said on the air this morning, he's to be congratulated because now we see them doing this. We see people in this country actually doing that, approaching people in restaurants, harassing them, to some point, some confrontations. So it's someone in a college atmosphere, in a class, regardless of what level of class that is, inculcating our kids. And I don't think he gets a pass on this one because of tenure.
Well, I'd add something to that as well, and it's this. The folks who love hearing him say stuff like that will say, well, we need to have loud voices in intellectual debate over important issues, except when it's somebody who states what the law says. So when I step up and that the state law says that you're not allowed to strike, all of a sudden I've said something that's unacceptable. And I get compared to Hitler and a slave owner and everything else you can think of in the last 24 hours. And I'll be honest with you, Paul, I just don't care. I mean, I was a conservative and president of the Federalist Society at Harvard Law School. I've heard all the names before. We've crossed that bridge already. So I don't care what they're going to call me. It doesn't matter to me at all. What matters is that somebody steps in the gap and says, the state law says X, Y, Z. Somebody violated X, Y, Z. That somebody ought to be held accountable. And I'd add on to it, too. A lot of times this strike law is actually pretty difficult to enforce because a lot of times people don't spell out exactly what they're doing, why they're doing it, and what work-related tasks they're not going to be doing. But in this case, we were very fortunate in that this professor spelled out both on Twitter and in an email to his students exactly what he would not be doing. He was not going to be responding to emails. He was not going to be teaching classes, and he had classes those days. He was not going to be responding to Zoom calls. He was not going to be holding office hours. So those students who I guess could have benefited from the services of his teaching didn't get a benefit those days. And I don't think that public dollars should pay him a salary for days that he didn't work in violation of the law. It's that simple.
So where do we go from here? And by the way, when you go back and you look at this guy, after those comments that made a lot of people in the state of Mississippi upset about that, after he made those comments, it was a resume enhancement. Apparently he got tenure, not only got tenure, but wasn't he placed in a position of deciding other people's tenure?
I actually don't know that. Yeah, I'm not aware of that. Certainly he got tenure, and we know that he got tenure after he made those statements. But again, we land back in the same spot, really, and I've said this over and over. The ideological basis for his actions, or the ideological antecedents before what he did today, are really not relevant to what I'm doing here, and they're not relevant to the statute. What's relevant here is that he decided that the law didn't apply to him. And I understand now that he's trying to twist and say, well, it wasn't really a strike, even though he used the word strike. It wasn't really a work stoppage, even though he used the words work stoppage.
Well, but
and that's going to be a hard argument for him to make.
I don't think he gets a chance to define those that terminology one way or the other. And by the way, I also want to mention.
No, he does not.
That earlier incident happened before this administration was in Dr. Glenn Boyce at the university. couple of other things while I got you. Can I catch up on some other things going on in State Auditor's office?
Yes, sir.
Let's do that.
Absolutely.
With the State Auditor Shad White. That is coming. Back with State Auditor Shad White, confirmed his office had been gathering documents and sent 2 agents to Thomas's home last week. Tell me a little bit about that we don't know. When the agents went there, what were they looking for, and what was the response?
You know, our sort of general practice, Paul, is when we believe somebody has done something illegal, we give them the opportunity to clarify what they did, to explain things. Mm-hmm. So, you know, sometimes you say agents sent to somebody's home. It sounds scary. It's just an accountant going to somebody's house saying, who happens to be trained in law enforcement too, going and saying, hey, can you tell me your side of the story on this? It looks like, according to an email, that you struck last week and also you engaged in a work stoppage. And the professor was given an opportunity to clarify what he did. He did not want to clarify it, did not want to add anything to it. And so we said, that's fine. We'll rely on the documents that you have already spelled out both on social media and in that email. And so that's what we've been doing since then, really, is gathering up those documents. It's going to take very, very little time, as you can imagine, because most of this stuff that we're talking about is out online and available. You can open up Twitter right now and see what he was doing during those 2 days. The email that he sent to students has been screen captured and shared around on the internet too. So this is actually going to take very little time in the end.
Is instead Auditor Shad White, my guess. Shad, is the possible infraction, the alleged infraction, exacerbated or increased as far as consequences are concerned? Should he have tried to recruit others to do the same?
Well, the statute does say that you're not allowed to strike, but it also says you're not allowed to encourage striking. So, I guess he violated the statute in multiple ways if he had tried to recruit other people. But really, you know, I fall back to this too. It's very rare that someone in public employment in Mississippi tries to strike, because most people know it's against the law. And even when some people have tried to strike, it's actually very difficult to prove that they met all of the qualifications in the statute unless that person happens to also spell it out. And that's what happened in this case.
Seems almost like when you run into a conservative professor at the university, it's an aberration. I don't understand this, other than the success of that movement over the decades has been very, very successful. A guy we've had on the air several times, Nathan Schrader, political science professor at Millsaps, said basically you're wasting public resources and you're wasting the time of the public by doing this.
Yeah, well, if Nathan had said, Nathan's a professor at Millsaps, and he's actually a friend of mine. If he had other than that, he would have been fired. He has to say that, obviously, because there's a tremendous amount of social pressure on campus at universities to call out any conservative. And in this case, again, I would go back to this point. What I'm doing is not conservative or liberal. It is literally just following the words in the law. And some people are going to say, you shouldn't be enforcing this law. Nobody should be enforcing this law. To those folks, they need to send me a list of the laws that they think are fake and the ones that need to be enforced. Which ones are the play pretend laws and which ones are the ones that we're supposed to be treating as real? Which ones am I supposed to ignore and which ones am I supposed to enforce? And I haven't seen a list like that yet. You know, for me, I wake up, I look at what the law is, I see what people are doing, I see how it relates to public funds, and then I enforce the law based on what my statute says. It's very, very simple.
But from you, a person who, you know, is a Rhodes Scholar too, and a native-born Mississippi, and you start looking at this, seeing that he would have been fired at Millsaps, and Millsaps is not a private, it is a private university, Christian university, is it not?
Yeah, I believe so. And you know, I see
that's saying quite a bit.
I see this a good bit, not only at universities, but at large corporations too. There's a lot of social pressure. Minimum, be quiet. But if you are going to say something, you have to say the words that sort of the woke left wants you to say. And look, that's fine. You know, I don't agree with it. I don't like it. But some people find themselves in jobs where they're put in that position, and I'm not gonna pay attention to what they say. In my job, I don't get the luxury of ignoring the law just because it might conflict with somebody's personal ideology. I don't get that luxury because the voters did not give me that luxury. They gave me this job so that I would enforce the law.
I would think most conservatives would agree with you, people who are really conservatives. If not, there would be the same people who see someone throwing a brick at a police car and said, well, just because there's a lot of people doing that and because they're doing it for a good reason, they shouldn't be charged with the law that they've just violated. So let me switch horses here. We had, speaking of new administrations, we have a new administration through the executive director at Mississippi Department of Human Services, and everything is shaping up, hopefully, over there from Bob Anderson. But there is still a forensic audit that is going on there.
Right. So right after we released our audit last year, our audit uncovered about $94 million of spending that looked like it was inappropriate and not legal. Mm-hmm. Remember, our audit, that audit only covered one fiscal year. It covered the last fiscal year. And John Davis had been director of DHS for more than just that past fiscal year. So what I said publicly at the time is that really what we need is a private CPA firm to come in, and they can check our work. Certainly here in the auditor's office, we've got 135 men and women who are at the top of their careers and know what they're doing, but they can check our work. And in addition to that, they can go back and look at the previous fiscal years, the other years when John Davis was director. So I made that recommendation. The leadership at DHS took me up on that recommendation. And right now we're in the middle of negotiating a three-party contract between the private CPA firm, DHS, and the state auditor's office. I think that we'll be able to reach terms on that contract pretty quickly, and that we'll be able to have the CPA firm come in and get started. So that will help us get to the bottom of every single penny of misspending and all the wrongdoing that happened in that case. And on the side of that too, that of course my office is working with federal criminal investigators to make sure that we get to the bottom of all the people who did things that were violations of criminal law too.
So the second one has not been formalized yet. It hasn't been funded officially yet. As far as the forensic,
the forensic audit has not been formalized in the sense that the contract has not been signed. But we were debating about it yesterday, and I put forward the terms that I think are reasonable on the contract. I want to make sure things are in there, like if you see fraud, you have to report it to law enforcement. Basic things like that. We're pretty close on that contract. And on the second piece, the federal/state criminal investigation, that is ongoing right now. So it's actively happening literally every single day.
Anything else going on while we have you on the air here that you'd like to mention as far as what's going on within the state auditor's office?
No, well, I'll tell you that we've got a lot of folks who are working really hard here. During the pandemic, a lot of counties around the state were forced to stop doing grand juries, were forced to stop doing full-on trials. But thankfully, a lot of those counties have now figured out ways to do that in a way that's safe, making sure that the jurors get socially distanced from one another and wear masks, I'm sure. So I would say expect our work to crank up a little bit here in the near future. I mean, we have done a good job, I think, working on investigations that are more complex over the course of the last few months. So, yeah, you've seen some of the action out of the state auditor's office over the past year. You can expect more of that.
Well, it just seemed that over the past couple of months, the Shadrach attacks had slowed down a little bit. We started worrying about you, so we're glad to see you.
I'm still here,
back in action. It's always good to see you, sir.
It's been difficult, to be honest.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's been difficult. No grand juries, but we're cranking back up right now.
And hope to get you back in the studio soon. You get a feeling that maybe in the next couple of months we'll be able to get that done. I hope so. Thank you, Shad. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you, my friend.